Hello, welcome to another video from the conscientious biologist, Ben Gallagher. This is quite a quick one. It's just on the human brain. Now, whilst that's an essential part of your body, there's very little that you need to know about it on the GCSE syllabus. This is the third one in the body communication series. Remember, it's from the GCSE specification. And as always, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you. So remember from the last videos, we talked about the brain being an essential part of the nervous pathway. It acts as the coordinator that deals with all the complex signaling that comes into our nervous system, and it can create very complex responses. It's the part of us that allows us to do our voluntary thinking, but it's so much more than that. Our brain is where we reside. It's the part of us that makes us us. It's where you get your personality. It's where you do all your processing of your relationships and interactions with other people. So it's such an important organ. Now for GCSE, there's only really three key parts of it that you need to know what they do specifically as a brain. There's also a few bits that are linked into the endocrine system, which we'll get onto in a couple of videos time. But let's just look at the brain as an overall organ. We can see your brain inside your head. It's protected by your hard skull, your cranium, because it's of such vital importance to your survival. You can also see the spine coming down from it, which we know is involved in the involuntary responses, or what we call reflexes. But let's just put an overlay inside that, and let's rotate it around just so you can see what I've got here. It's as if I've taken the brain of this person, but I've taken a cross section down through it so that we can look into their brain. Now, just for simplicity of the diagram, let's get rid of the background one. So we've just got the key bit. Now, the really important bit of your brain is that large sort of pink area that you can see there. That's the cerebral cortex, or cerebrum, you sometimes see it referred to. The cerebral cortex is that highly folded, really intricate bit. It's absolutely jam-packed with relay neurons. It's where there's so many connections going on, so many synapses carrying loads and loads of information, because your cerebrum, or cerebral cortex, is where you do all your thinking. So it's responsible for your consciousness, which means everything that you're conscious of, you being aware of you and your surroundings and everything else. It's where your intelligence resides, where you can store all the information, do all your complex processing to be intelligent. It's where all your memories reside. It's where your language can come from, because of course language is largely based on your memory of symbols and sounds and what they mean. So your cerebral cortex really is the bit that makes you you. However, there's this big lump sort of beneath the cerebral cortex that's actually at the back of our head back here. This is the cerebellum. Now your cerebellum is also really important because it's where you coordinate all your muscular activities. It's where you do the main signals that go out to your muscles that tell you how to move about. So it's the bit that's essential for movement, balance, sporting ability, all that kind of stuff. So whilst your cerebral cortex does most of your thinking, your cerebellum controls more of your physical body. Okay, now you've also got this bit, this sort of lump that sticks from, so this is still sort of under the brain, but it's connected up into the brain. Everything that's on this diagram is all part of the brain. Okay, but this is your medulla. Now your medulla takes care of your unconscious activities, not reflexes. Those are unconscious involuntary responses to things. These are just the unconscious activities that have to go on all the time to keep you alive, like telling your body to breathe and telling your heart to beat. You don't consciously sit there going, oh, I'd better take a breath, or I'd better tell my heart to beat. Your medulla does that for you. It takes care of that stuff. So those are the three really important areas that will come up in the exam. That's why I've put them in bold print, so make sure you know those. But just a couple of others you need to know about. The spinal cord, of course, because it's part of your nervous pathway. And just to remind you, that's where you have the coordination of your involuntary responses or reflexes. And then two little extra bits we're going to put on here. That little sort of pink blob in the middle there. Now, you're not going to be asked in the exam to draw it on or anything, but you do need to know there's a key bit inside the brain. We talk about it in a couple of videos time, called the hypothalamus. Beneath that, sort of slightly dangling underneath the brain, you've got this really important endocrine gland called the pituitary gland, We're going to do a lot more on the pituitary in a couple of videos time, but I wanted to mention it here. So if you're coming back to revise sort of late on in your course, or you've already looked at some of the endocrine stuff and the hormone stuff, it just reminds you where it is in the brain. Okay, that's pretty much everything you need to know about the brain. So this is quite a short video, but really importantly, take a screenshot of this and make sure you know the names of those three key parts of the brain: the cerebral cortex, the cerebellum, and the medulla, and you know what they're responsible for, because that's what's going to come up in the exam. So take a screenshot of this now. Now, a really good question is, how do we know what all these different parts of the brain do? Because you can't sort of look at them and see them working. You can't sort of pull a bit out and go, oh yeah, I can see that. You know, with the heart, if you're doing an invasive operation, so you're actually opening up the body, you can see the heart pumping. You can see what it does. You can analyze the biochemicals that are made in different organs of the body and go, oh, okay, look at that. That's processing something or other. It's very hard to analyze thinking and see what those responsibilities are. But there are some really good ways that we can study the brain and find out what's going on. And most importantly, those ways are non-invasive methods. What I mean by that is you don't actually have to cut open someone's brain, open up their head, cut the top of their skull off to actually have a look at their brain and invade their body. You can do it in a non-invasive way. And the most common way that this is done nowadays is through magnetic resonance imaging, or an MRI. You've probably heard about people going for MRI scans. If you've ever had a sporting injury or something, you may have had to have an MRI scan on a knee or a shoulder or something like that. But they use big MRI machines like this one that you go into, and they do very, very complex scans of your internal systems and can get diagrams like these two up above me. Really detailed, really complex images of what's going on inside your body. Way more than you'd get on just an X-ray. So if you look at this one above me, you can see it's a side MRI scan through someone's head, but you can see, you can see their nose, their lips, you can see all of the structures. You can see the cerebral cortex up there highly folded. You can see the bulge of the medulla coming out. You can see the cerebellum as that slightly leaf-shaped thing coming out at the back. You should be able to identify lots of the structures that you can see on that picture. But the one in the middle you can see is both a side section and a section across through sideways that way, so you're looking down on the top of the skull. So both really, really important diagrams that you can use as diagnostic tools to look if anyone's got any damage to any areas of the brain, or if they've got any brain tumours or anything like that in there. So MRI scans are really, really important. But can they actually tell you what each bit of the brain is doing? Well, not so much, okay? So you could use something to measure the electrical activity that's going on in people's brains. Remember, it's electrical impulses traveling along your neurons, be they sensory neurons, relay neurons, or motor neurons. So if one bit of the brain is particularly active when you're doing a certain task, you can know that, right, well, that task, that thing is linked to that area of the brain. So you can get people like this, and you can get them sort of wired up. You put electrodes which just kind of stuck on their head that measure the electrical activity that's going on. And you can get them to do different things, like this guy having to write things out. So you can measure, well, what bits of the brain are showing the highest electrical activity when that's happening. And you can kind of map where the different bits of the brain are most active during what tasks. So that's a really good way that you can measure what's going on in the brain. Something else that's really useful, though, that you can use both techniques to do is kind of make use of something that can be quite awful. Things like brain injuries. If someone has sustained a brain injury, they've been in a car crash or they've been smacked on the head or something like that, and you know that part of their brain is damaged and you know what they can't do, then you can kind of make some links. So if someone's got smacked in the back of the head and damaged their cerebellum, you might find that their motor control, their musculature, is all over the place, okay? One thing where you can get injuries to the brain in lots of different places, in lots of ways, something really, really tragic, but we've talked about it before, is in a stroke. Now, a stroke, we talked about when we did cardiovascular disease, is where there's a blockage in one of the arteries or smaller arterioles that service part of the brain. If no blood can get to that part of the brain, it can die. Now, that's a really bad thing. This is a poster trying to help people who've had strokes or trying to maximize their chance of recovery using this fast initials to try and trigger you to understand when people need help. So you look at someone, and if you can see their face has started to droop or start to sag, if their arm control has started to be lost, if their speech has gone a bit funny, that's the F, A and S, then it's time to call an ambulance, because the quicker you can get help to someone who's had a stroke, the better the chance of saving that part of the brain and allowing them a full recovery. But if someone has had a stroke and has got a damage to a certain area, you can measure the electrical activity in the different areas of their brain, including the damaged area, and do MRI scans, and you can try and match up what are they failing to do and what areas of the brain are struggling, so you can know which bits of the brain you might want to go in and try and fix, and then use invasive methods. I saw a brilliant video quite recently of someone doing an operation on a brain where they removed a blood clot, having identified using MRI, having identified where there was a blood clot in someone's brain that was suffocating part of the brain. They then used an invasive technique, so an operation, to go in, remove the blood clot. Blood could start flowing back to that area of the brain, and the person made a full recovery. So using a combination of these techniques can really inform how to help people and how best to treat injuries of the brain or issues with the brain. So take a screenshot of this one, because these are the main ways you need to know about for how the brain is studied. Now, sadly, in biology, that's literally all we do on the brain. You know those 3 areas and what they do, and you know how we study them. Now, the science of psychology looks into that at a much bigger scale. So if you're interested in the brain, you might want to look at a psychology A level to move on to once you've got your biology stuff. But in biology, that's all we do. So make sure you know everything that's in this video. What we're going to do next is move on to looking at the human eye in a lot more detail as a receptor organ as part of the nervous pathway. There's 2 videos in that. The first one is very brief, just looks at the structure of the eye. The one after it then looks at some of the control mechanisms within the eye that allow you to have effective vision. Head on to those now, please. As always, do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Like this video if you found it useful, and do head over and have a look at the information on my Facebook page as well. Thank you.